Soundstripe.
Hello and welcome to the Natalie Wisewoman podcast, a place where I bring in the wise women and men of this world to discuss topics related to becoming your highest potential. Enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Natalie Wisewoman podcast. Today I have Virginia Underwood on my podcast again. I'm so excited. She's a dear, dear friend, and I'm so honored to have her here, share her medicine, her voice, to speak about something that I think we both find very, very important and something that we can see that is kind of a missing link in, or something that's missing when people get stuck in their lives. And this is something that came up in Peru when we were together having some deep discussions, and we were both talking about victimhood and how that is something that keeps people stuck. And I think that's also part of the kind of Western therapy model is keeping people stuck in that victimhood. Interestingly enough, we talked about this in April, and I just recently started reading a book about this topic for my therapist training. So I kind of reading the science afterwards on what we already intuitively kind of had seen in our own lives. So it's quite normal that when people seek out help for something traumatic that has happened in their life, the first thing, a therapist might do is to kind of make sure that that person knows that it wasn't their fault and that someone hurt them and did something bad to them. So they basically, you are a victim and that's okay, like you didn't do anything wrong. But I think the problem is when people get stuck in that, like it's okay, yes, to be in that for a moment, to see, okay, someone else hurt me and I'm a victim. But if you stay there and it becomes an identity, then that can become very detrimental. And I think that's also something that can then repeat in many, many situations. So this is something I see with people around me, where they go into these loops where they think that everything is always happening to them, and they can't really see the gold nuggets that are in the biggest challenges of life. And like I've said before, that me having an eating disorder and a lot of anxiety when I was younger was actually the most important thing that ever happened to me. It was the biggest challenge I ever had, to be able to deal with my emotions. And but through that challenge actually came that gift of being able to help people and actually help people solve emotional issues, which is my kind of what I'm doing as my purpose right now. And if I would just stay in a victimhood and like dismiss whatever that thing was trying to teach me, then I can't actually, transmute it into something that I could benefit. It's about empowering, finding empowerment in every situation, not, of course, gaslighting, whatever people go through, horrible things. So I think it was so beautiful to talk to you, Virginia, because I could see you were really passionate about this topic. You were kind of telling your own story, and you've been through hell in your life, many of the experiences, but you were like, I'm not a victim, and like telling me how these things happened to you so you could kind of become who you are today. And I think you're a true inspiration in what you do. And so would you like to share a little bit more about how your life changed when you kind of realized that you're not a victim of things that happened to you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, I have gone through quite a bit, and, there are plenty of people who've been through worse, but my story is one of different forms of abuse. I was physically abused, mentally abused, sexually abused when I was little from various adults, authority figures in my life. And so I had a very, what would you say? very limited perception about myself and about my abilities. I felt like a victim. I felt like everything was happening to me. I could never catch a break. The world was this really scary um, place that you had to constantly be on guard and, not be able, I couldn't trust anyone, you know, just on and on I could go. Um, and so at one point in my life, I got very sick, so sick that I couldn't get out of bed for months at a time. So sick that I couldn't watch television. I couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't even keep my eyes open. So I would just lay there in my bed and I couldn't go to sleep. I would just lay there for hours at a time. And I started to really become aware of what was going through my head and all of these thoughts about why is this happening to me? Like you said, why is this happening? Why can't my life ever have anything good? Or, you know, just that sort of mentality. And it's like this light bulb kind of came on, and it was like, wait a second, these are all beliefs. This is not really the truth of this life. And yes, these things have happened, and there might have been people who perpetrated things against me. But then I started to look at those people and what their life was like and how they dealt with things and what might be going on inside of them. And it was like, well, they're just like me. They're just doing the best that they can, even if it doesn't look like their best to me. I don't know their experience. And when I started to come from that perspective, then I couldn't I couldn't feel victimized anymore. I couldn't look at them like you're an awful person. All I could see was their humanity. All I could see was you've had a hard life too, or, you've been through something that has created this belief in you that you have to put your defenses up, or you have to, you know, say aggressive things, or, whatever circumstances there were. Um, And the more that I worked through the past trauma of what I experienced and really questioned all those beliefs that I held about that people shouldn't be this way and people shouldn't do this and people should do this and my parents should be like this, and I let all of that go. First of all, the amount of space that you create. Wow. I mean, that in and of itself is just because I lived with so much anxiety and fear for like the first 40 years of my life. All I did was constantly checking to make sure that I was okay, checking to make sure that I was safe. Um, and so when I could let all that go, I could feel that I was safe. I could feel that I didn't need to constantly um, pay attention to the details, if that makes sense. Um, and now, I mean, I'm so excited for life every day that I wake up. Um, I know that nothing is happening to me. As a matter of fact, I thought this was really cool. So here's a little personal story. Um, I just entered the dating uh, scene again after many years of not dating. And so I was on this app the other day, and this gentleman was asking me about one of my tattoos. And so I was telling him about it, and he started telling me that, you know, well, I won't go into the details, but he started really pushing his beliefs on me, telling me that I was believing something because of a tattoo that I have on my body. And then he was telling me just all these things that it was like he was the authority and I knew nothing, and that
Mm.
he was school me. So I stopped talking to him. Like, I don't need that kind of energy in my life. That's not the kind of relationship that I want. So a few days have gone by, and this gentleman reached out to me this morning and made some comment about short attention spans. And in the past, when I felt like a victim, I would have gotten so much anxiety because this person said these things to me. Oh my goodness. You're so mean. I'm being victimized. He's doing this to me. And I wouldn't have been able to respond to him. I would have felt really fearful. And so I would have just left it and walked away. But this morning it was like, I'm going to tell you exactly why I stopped talking to you. I don't appreciate being talked to like this. I don't appreciate people telling me what to believe or how I'm going to believe. I'm not here to defer to anyone in a relationship. And I did not have any anxiety as I said these things. I didn't second guess myself. I just hit send, and that was the end of it. And I can't tell you how empowered it feels to be in this space. I don't have to care what you think about me. I don't have to feel like a victim because of what you're saying. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to stand in my power.
Yes, I think that's exactly what's so beautiful. It's about the empowerment, and that's what I want to people to understand, that they can take the power back and really it's about taking responsibility. Like what, because if you're a victim, like how can you take responsibility because you were hurt and someone did something to you? But it's like what role do I play in this situation? Even though it's like, because I'm not immune to victimhood thoughts. Like I can see them creeping in when something horrible happens. Like, let's say I have an exam. This was a scenario that happened, and then that day my partner decides that wants to spill some anxiety on me, and then there's a fight, and I get into, why does this always happen to me when I have something important like an exam or a job or interview or something? Why is it always then that I'm in a fight or something before, so I can't like focus? But then I'm like, well, this is not helpful to think that this always happens to me or that I'm a victim of this situation, because it's more helpful to think, how am I co-creating this situation and what can I do differently in the future? Like maybe I can actually work on my boundaries. Maybe I can work on my communication, to communicate in the morning that this is an important day, that please can we, give space to this, for me to focus on something important, or put up boundaries when I see that something happens and not be like. So all these moments are places where we can actually take charge and do something, take charge of our lives and be responsible. And like you said, like do something maybe different, and empower ourselves in who we are, and like stand strong. Like, who do I really want to be? I want to be someone who can tell someone how I feel, and not be like, oh, I'm going to be anxious now. And because that gives the power to that, because you're the victim and they are like, it's a hierarchy. So they kind of are above you then. But now you
Exactly.
took the power back. So you're not a victim.
No, and now we can stand equally.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So I think also an important part with when traumatic things happen, or when you do something that's wrong, I think forgiveness is also an important part. And it's really, really difficult to forgive someone because you want to be angry at them. And this is also what you kind of you kind of touched on this topic, that when you were kind of, walking around thinking about what everybody did wrong to you, it was taking up so much energy because you were holding on to these kind of like beliefs about like how someone should have done it differently. And we can't change what other people do, we can't change what happened in the past, so there's no point really to hold on to all of those things. I think forgiveness practices is really important, and it's not about, saying that this was okay what happened, but it's like accepting that this happened, and I release that now, and I no longer let that affect me, or carry my energy, or take my energy.
Exactly. Well, there's a saying, what is it, that revenge is like uh, having poison, and instead of giving it to the other person, you are taking it. So when we hold a grudge or we want to get revenge, or I don't remember exactly what it said. I'm not great at repeating quotes, but I think most people can understand this if they haven't heard it before. Um, when we don't forgive, we are the ones holding on to that pain. And that pain is creating a stagnancy within our body. So the energy can't flow. So that eventually is going to create dis-ease in our body. So it's not going to affect that person that you're angry with or you feel has wronged you in any way. All it's doing is hurting you. So forgiveness is never about anyone else or what they've done. It's about accepting this within ourselves, that this has happened and it does not define us. And when we let it go, like I said before, it opens up so much space for us so that we can see possibilities in our life for, better relationships, or like you said, creating boundaries. Um, I mean, that right there, we are always responsible for some part of a situation.
Mm.
You know, in psychology, there's this, it's called the victim triangle. So you have the victim, you have the perpetrator, and you have the hero. But all three of these points on that triangle are a victim. Because if somebody believes that they're going to save somebody, then they're also coming from the same mentality of victimhood, that there is a right and a wrong, that somebody is doing something to you.
Mm.
And it's the same with the perpetrator. Yeah, they're being mean, or they're doing something to you, but when we get to the core of this, it's because that person has had something done to them. When I first started looking, so many years ago, I did this workshop called the School for the Work with a incredible teacher named Byron Katie. And she talks about questioning your thoughts. And so I went to her workshop, and I was working through my sexual abuse at this point, and some really major trauma that I had experienced. And basically, she was telling me to let them go, to forgive them, to see them as the truth of who they are, which is the same as me. It's this light, it's this love, it's this creative energy. They were just believing their thoughts. Whatever they did to me, they were believing a thought. So, for example, I was held up by gunpoint at one point in my life, and it was very traumatic. I had nightmares about this for years afterwards. And when I looked at this person, when I did this work with them, and I saw the suffering in their eyes, because I can still remember their eyes vividly. It's like stuck in my brain, one of those seared in my brain kind of things. That person was in so much pain, you could feel it. I mean, Who would stick a gun in another person's face if they weren't in pain, if they weren't believing some thought that this was what they needed to do to move forward in their life?
Mm.
So how can I blame them when that's what they're feeling? I'm not saying what they did was right, but I can't be angry with them. I can see their humanity. I can see the little wounded child within them that didn't get the love and the support that they needed in order to cope with their life in a way that would have been beneficial to all, right? Um, and there was a great story that happened while I was at this workshop. So Byron Katie brought in the Rwandan tribes, the Hutu and the Tutsis, representatives from both of them. And they began to do this work together of questioning their thoughts. And one gentleman whose wife had been killed in front of him says, every day I watch my wife be killed in front of my eyes over and over again. And Byron Katie says to him, sweetheart, why would you do that to yourself? This person killed your wife. They did it, and they did it one time. Every time you bring that thought to your awareness, you are killing her again, over and over again. Why would you do that to yourself? And this is the question that I want to ask everybody. Why do you want to live in that pain and that suffering when you truly have a choice? You don't have to live in that space. And no, it's not easy. It's not like you can just say, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore and go on. I get that. But with effort and paying attention to your thoughts, you can absolutely completely change your reality. And as Byron Katie says, thoughts don't hold on to you. So as soon as you can see the truth about a thought, it disappears. It no longer has any energy or power over you.
Yes. And I think this is exactly the point that, these thoughts may reappear, and they still do, like thoughts that I've been working on for so long, they still reappear, but I can take distance from them. So I can look at it objectively and like, wait a minute, play devil's advocate. What if this is not true? And then you can actually practice on actually not believing them, and then they come less, the frequency changes, so they don't appear as often. But it's not like you say, it's not about clicking a finger and it's gone, but it's about doing the work and actually starting to pay attention to what's going on. And I think this is something that I've heard a lot of people that go to therapy and try to deal with some traumatic issues, is that they almost get re-traumatized by over and over telling the same story, maybe to different therapists, or like they're just going through that story and telling that over and over again. You kind of almost become more and more of a victim every time. It's like, well, how am I ever going to get out of this? It's not helping to just tell the story again and again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and think about the neural pathways within the brain. When we have a thought, it might be like this very narrow pathway, right? Because we've never had this thought before. So it's not, you know, well worn yet. But if we have a thought over and over and over again, then it's like a rutted path, right? It's very worn. We know this path. We move down this path. We understand what's going to happen on this path. So trying to change that and to go onto a new path can be really challenging, because it's like you've got to take your weed whacker and cut down the weeds as you go, and you don't know where you're going. You don't know what anything's going to look like. But if you keep going, then you find that you can create this new path, and it can be absolutely beautiful. I don't know if that made sense.
Yes, I feel that's exactly. So you kind of have to word that out again, like a new path. And I
Mhm.
think it is scary to go down like, well, how am I going to believe anything else? Like I've always believed this thing, but I would tell anyone like try. You can always go back to the old thoughts you had. It's like so, but just try something new, try questioning them. What if this is not true? What if actually the thought I'm having about myself, about someone else is not true? And what could be another option? And what would be a more empowering option, actually?
Right. Exactly. Another thing that I love to tell myself, especially when I start to want to go down the rabbit hole of the negative thinking, is I don't know what anything is for. I don't know what this situation is for. I don't know what these people in my life are for. I don't know what any of this is for. So, why am I going to make up a story about it when the possibilities are endless? And just because something may start off and seem like familiar, like, oh, okay, I think I've been down this path. But if we don't create a story around it, it may turn out like it always has, but most often it's going to be something completely different because you didn't create the story around it.
Yes, exactly. Especially if it feels like that's actually aligned for you and that's what you should be doing. So um that's actually a good way to look at it and to try different things out, like a new way to think. And it's not about toxic like positive psychology, like toxic positivity, where everything is just happy, happy, joy, joy, and oh, my husband beat me. But it's more about like seeing how this challenge, where is the gold? How can I? Because I believe we come here to experience certain things so that we can actually, well, you could say burn off karma. You could say that we're here to almost like evolution, like to go through a bit of chaos so that we can, find that harmony and balance, because I don't think anyone's life is going to be easy. It's always going to have different challenges, but that's what gets us to, it's kind of like you climb a mountain. It's not easy, but when you get to the top, it's so beautiful and you feel so empowered because you got through that and you were able to actually navigate forward and not give up.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So, for anyone who's been feeling like a victim or who wants to do change that, I highly recommend looking into resources. I don't know if you, Virginia, know of some specific resources where people can work on with victimhood.
Well, yes, one of them I mentioned, Byron Katie's work. It's actually called The Work. And you can find her at thework.com. She has a tremendous library of resources. Her work is all about, like I said, questioning your thoughts. She has 4 very specific questions that you ask about a thought. And when you first do this, it's really good to write down these things so you can get into, because our mind wants to go off in a million different directions. And if it's challenging, we tend to distract ourselves, right? So it's really good to write it down or to work with a partner and have them ask the questions and just hold space for you as you go through it. But she also offers, there are lots of videos of Byron Katie going through these questions with someone. And really, um, you can do them all yourself, but you can also watch her videos and watch people go through it because we're all human. Regardless of our differences, we all have the same feelings within us. They manifest in different ways and forms, but it's all the same within us. And so when we watch somebody else going through this questioning process, it actually helps us to see the same things or something similar that's happening within us. And it helps us to see the truth which then just, again, it just unravels. Um, Another resource that I love that I've just been really digging into lately is this book called Igniting Greatness by a man named Howard Glasser, who created something called the nurtured heart approach. And he is all about focusing on what is working instead of what isn't working. And you touched on this when we first started talking about how, we tend to look at the negative. We tend to always catastrophize situations. Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. It's only going to unravel from here. Life is going to get worse and blah, 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 blah. He's talking about stop focusing on what could happen and, you know, the negativity in here and looked, like you said, for the gold. So, like, I'm climbing a mountain and I'm really challenged, but I can see that I'm persevering. Perseverance is a fantastic skill to have, and that's going to help me get to the top of this mountain. So when I focus on the fact that I have perseverance instead of the fact that, oh my gosh, this is challenging and I don't think I can do this, I think Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So if you think you can't get up the mountain and you focus on that, you're not getting up the mountain. But if you think, hey, I've got perseverance and I know from my past that I'm like a bulldog, I'm going to push through. I'm going to reach the top of that mountain because I can feel that greatness within me.
Mm.
So I love that. And I don't know how many of these there are, but I was fortunate enough to get involved in what's called a greatness circle when I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and got the opportunity to experience this work firsthand. And so now I'm bringing it to where I live and creating this circle so that I can help other people start to recognize their own greatness and focus on that instead of what isn't working.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And thank you for the resources. I will link them in the description so then people can find them. And thank you for joining me today. And I hope people got something out of this. And thank you for sharing your personal story as well, a little bit. And yeah, I hope everyone has a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Natalie. This has been wonderful. I always enjoy getting to spend time with you and to have these deep conversations. I love our connection.
Sounds good.